At 6:30 one quiet morning, a 64-year-old man named Ahmed sat at his kitchen table staring at a bowl of fruit. Bananas, grapes, mango. Healthy, he thought. But a few hours later, his energy crashed. And that night, so did his confidence in the bedroom. What if I told you that the very fruits many men over 60 eat for breakfast could be silently sabotaging their erections? As men pass the age of 60, their bodies no longer process sugar the way they did in their 30 seconds or 40 seconds, and this change has a powerful impact on blood flow, especially the kind of blood flow required for strong erections. In younger years, the body could handle a sudden rush of sugar with little consequence. Insulin responded quickly, blood vessels stayed flexible, and circulation bounced back without much damage. But after 60, insulin sensitivity drops, arteries naturally stiffen, and the margin for error becomes much smaller. This is where morning sugar spikes quietly begin to sabotage sexual performance. Many fruits that are considered healthy contain large amounts of fast-absorbing natural sugars. When these fruits are eaten first thing in the morning, especially on an empty stomach, they cause glucose to flood the bloodstream rapidly. This sharp rise in blood sugar forces the body to release a surge of insulin. Over time, repeated insulin spikes damage the inner lining of blood vessels known as the endothelium. This lining is crucial because it controls how well blood vessels expand and relax. Erections rely on this exact mechanism. Arteries must open wide and stay relaxed long enough to allow strong, sustained blood flow into penile tissue. When blood vessels lose elasticity, erections weaken, shorten, or disappear altogether. The danger is not immediate, which is why so many men never connect breakfast choices with bedroom performance. The damage builds slowly and silently. Each morning sugar spike creates tiny amounts of inflammation inside blood vessels. Day after day, year after year, this inflammation hardens arteries and reduces nitric oxide production. Nitric oxide is the chemical signal that tells blood vessels to relax. Without enough of it, even strong desire cannot produce a strong erection. The brain may be ready, but the blood vessels simply cannot respond. Another overlooked problem is how long the effects of a morning sugar spike last. When blood sugar rises too fast in the morning, it often crashes later, leading to fatigue, brain fog, and irritability. This crash increases stress hormones like cortisol. High cortisol further tightens blood vessels and blocks testosterone activity. The result is a full-day cycle of poor circulation, low energy, and reduced sexual responsiveness, all triggered by what seemed like a harmless bowl of fruit at breakfast. As men age, the arteries supplying blood to the penis are among the first to show damage because they are smaller than coronary arteries. Even mild reductions in blood flow that might not yet affect the heart can noticeably affect erections. This is why erectile changes often appear years before serious cardiovascular symptoms. Morning sugar spikes accelerate this process by repeatedly stressing these small, sensitive vessels. What makes this issue especially deceptive is the belief that natural sugar is safe. While fruit sugar is not the same as processed sugar, the body still processes glucose and fructose in similar ways once they enter the bloodstream. Large portions of sweet fruit eaten alone, without protein or healthy fats to slow absorption, hit the bloodstream almost as fast as dessert. After 60, the body simply doesn't forgive these spikes anymore. This does not mean fruit must be eliminated completely. The real problem lies in timing, quantity, and context. Eating sweet fruit first thing in the morning creates the worst possible conditions for blood flow because cortisol is already high, insulin sensitivity is lowest, and arteries are least flexible at that time of day. Later in the day, or when paired with protein and healthy fats, the same fruit causes far less harm. Unfortunately, many older men unknowingly repeat the most damaging pattern daily: fruit-only breakfasts that quietly erode vascular health. A short example makes this clear. A 67-year-old man named Rashid believed he was doing everything right. Every morning he ate a large banana and a bowl of grapes, skipped protein, and avoided fats. By noon he felt tired, and by evening, intimacy felt like a struggle. After learning about sugar spikes, he changed just one habit. He added eggs and nuts to breakfast and saved fruit for the afternoon. Within weeks, his energy stabilized. Within months, his erections became firmer and more reliable, not because of medication, but because blood flow finally had a chance to work properly again. The key truth is simple but uncomfortable. Erections are not just about desire or age, they are a direct reflection of blood vessel health. After 60, every sharp sugar spike is a small withdrawal from your circulation account. When those withdrawals happen every morning, the body eventually runs out of flexibility. Protecting erections means protecting blood flow, and protecting blood flow starts with avoiding sudden sugar floods when the body is most vulnerable. As men move past 60, testosterone no longer behaves the way it once did. It isn't just about how much the body produces, but how efficiently it activates, converts, and delivers that hormone to the tissues that need it most. One of the most overlooked disruptors of this delicate process is excessive fructose intake, especially from certain fruits, eaten regularly and in large amounts. While fruit is often labeled as universally healthy, the truth is that fructose places a unique burden on the liver, and after 60, the liver's tolerance for that burden drops sharply. Fructose is processed almost entirely by the liver. Unlike glucose, which can be used by nearly every cell in the body for energy, fructose must be converted in the liver before it can be used or stored. When a man consumes high fructose fruits frequently, particularly first thing in the morning, the liver is forced to work overtime. In younger men, the liver adapts easily. In older men, however, liver efficiency naturally declines. This creates a silent bottleneck that affects hormone balance in ways most men never suspect. The liver plays a critical role in testosterone metabolism. It helps convert raw hormone signals into usable testosterone and clears excess estrogen from the body. When the liver is stressed by repeated fructose overload, these processes slow down. Testosterone conversion becomes less efficient, while estrogen clearance weakens. The result is not always a dramatic hormonal crash, but a subtle shift: slightly lower testosterone, slightly higher estrogen, and a noticeable decline in sexual strength, stamina, and recovery. This matters because erections depend on testosterone far beyond simple desire. Testosterone supports nitric oxide production, which is essential for blood vessel relaxation. It strengthens nerve signaling between the brain and the penis. It maintains the health of penile tissue itself. When testosterone drops even modestly, erections may still occur, but they become softer, less reliable, and harder to sustain. Many men mistake this for normal aging, never realizing that daily dietary habits are quietly pushing hormones in the wrong direction. High fructose intake also promotes fat accumulation in the liver, a condition increasingly common in men over 60. Even mild fatty liver changes can interfere with hormone regulation. Fat tissue converts testosterone into estrogen through an enzyme called aromatase. As liver stress increases and fat accumulation rises, more testosterone is diverted away from its active form. This creates a vicious cycle. Lower testosterone leads to less muscle and more fat, which further lowers testosterone. Another hidden issue is timing. When high fructose fruits are eaten in the morning, cortisol, the stress hormone, is already elevated. Fructose metabolism under high cortisol conditions further suppresses testosterone signaling. This means that the hormonal impact of a fruit-heavy breakfast can linger all day, affecting mood, confidence, energy, and sexual responsiveness long after the meal is forgotten. The danger lies not in occasional fruit consumption, but in routine exposure. Eating large portions of sweet fruits daily trains the liver to prioritize sugar handling over hormone optimization. Over months and years, this reprogramming subtly reshapes a man's hormonal environment. Testosterone doesn't disappear overnight. It fades quietly, often without triggering obvious warning signs, until erectile strength noticeably declines. What makes this especially deceptive is that many men choose these fruits believing they are protecting their heart and overall health. They may avoid processed sugar, desserts, and soft drinks, yet unknowingly consume comparable fructose loads through grapes, mangoes, bananas, dates, or dried fruits. The body does not distinguish intention. It only responds to metabolic demand. This does not mean fruit must be eliminated entirely. The key is moderation, timing, and balance. Pairing fruit with protein and healthy fats slows fructose absorption and reduces liver stress. Consuming smaller portions later in the day, when insulin sensitivity improves, dramatically reduces hormonal disruption. Men who make these changes often notice improvements not only in erections, but also in energy, mental clarity, and motivation. A short example illustrates this clearly. A 69-year-old man named Farouk had no interest in medication but felt his sexual strength fading year by year. His routine seemed healthy. Every morning he ate a large bowl of grapes and a banana smoothie. After learning about fructose and testosterone, he didn't quit fruit. He changed how he ate it. He added eggs and olive oil to breakfast and limited fruit to small portions in the afternoon. Within 2 months, his morning energy improved. Within several more, his erections became firmer and his recovery faster. Nothing magical happened. His liver simply stopped being overworked, allowing testosterone to function properly again. The uncomfortable truth is that testosterone decline after 60 is not always inevitable. In many cases, it is accelerated by daily habits that quietly interfere with the body's hormonal machinery. High fructose fruits, especially when eaten carelessly and routinely, can push testosterone lower without a single obvious symptom, until sexual performance begins to suffer. Protecting erections means protecting testosterone, and protecting testosterone means respecting the liver's emits as the body ages. As men move past 60, the body becomes far more sensitive to stress signals, and one of the most powerful of these signals is cortisol, the primary stress hormone. Cortisol is not inherently bad. It helps you wake up, mobilize energy, and respond to challenges. The problem arises when cortisol rises too high or stays elevated for too long, especially early in the day. This is where the habit of eating sweet fruit alone on an empty stomach quietly creates trouble that many older men never connect to their sexual health. When you wake up in the morning, cortisol is already naturally elevated. This is part of the body's built-in alarm system that gets you out of bed. At the same time, blood sugar is low after an overnight fast. If the first thing you consume is fruit, especially sweet, fast-digesting fruit, it floods the bloodstream with sugar very quickly. The body interprets this sudden surge as metabolic stress. To manage it, cortisol rises even further to stabilize blood sugar and energy levels. What feels like a light, healthy breakfast is actually sending a stress signal through the nervous system. Elevated cortisol has a direct and immediate impact on testosterone. These two hormones work in opposition. When cortisol goes up, testosterone activity goes down. This does not always show up in blood tests right away, but it strongly affects how testosterone functions at the tissue level. Testosterone is responsible for maintaining libido, supporting NIT, nitric oxide production, and keeping nerve signaling between the brain and the penis strong. When cortisol dominates the hormonal environment, these processes are dampened. Desire may feel weaker, arousal slower, and erections less responsive, even if interest is still there mentally. Another issue is how cortisol affects the nervous system. Erections are not just about blood flow, they depend on a calm, responsive parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and connect state. High cortisol pushes the body into a mild fight-or-flight mode. In this state, blood is prioritized for muscles and vital organs, not sexual function. The penis becomes a low priority. Even hours after breakfast, the nervous system may still be biased toward tension rather than relaxation, making erections harder to initiate and maintain. Eating fruit alone also lacks the buffering effect of protein and healthy fats. Protein and fats slow digestion and reduce the speed at which sugar enters the bloodstream. Without them, blood sugar rises quickly and often crashes later. This crash triggers another cortisol release to prevent blood sugar from dropping too low. The result is a roller coaster. Cortisol rises in the morning, dips briefly, then rises again later in the day. This repeated activation keeps testosterone suppressed for longer periods, often extending into the evening, right when intimacy is most likely to occur. Over time, this pattern becomes chronic. The body learns to associate mornings with metabolic stress instead of stable nourishment. Cortisol rhythms flatten or stay elevated longer than they should. Testosterone signaling becomes weaker, not because the body cannot produce it, but because the hormonal environment is hostile to its effects. Many men assume this is simply aging, when in reality it is a daily stress response triggered by a seemingly innocent habit. There is also a psychological component. High cortisol reduces dopamine sensitivity, the chemical linked to motivation and pleasure. This means sexual interest may feel muted, erections may feel less rewarding, and confidence may slowly erode. These changes are subtle and gradual, which is why they are so often ignored or misattributed to age alone. The irony is that fruit itself is not the villain. The problem is context. Fruit eaten later in the day, or combined with protein and fat, does not produce the same cortisol spike. In fact, in the right setting, fruit can support overall health. But eaten alone, first thing in the morning, when cortisol is already high and the body is most vulnerable to stress signals, sweet fruit amplifies the very hormonal conditions that work against sexual function. A short example makes this clear. A 65-year-old man named Imran started his mornings with only an apple and a banana, believing he was eating clean. By evening, he often felt tense, low in energy, and disconnected from desire. After learning about cortisol, he changed just one thing. He added eggs and a small amount of healthy fat to breakfast and saved fruit for later in the day. Within a few weeks, his energy felt steadier. Within a couple of months, his erections became more responsive and reliable. Nothing dramatic changed. His body simply stopped receiving a daily stress signal first thing in the morning. The deeper truth is that sexual health after 60 depends heavily on hormonal balance and nervous system calm. Anything that repeatedly raises cortisol undermines both. Eating sweet fruit alone on an empty stomach is one of the most common overlooked ways older men unknowingly trigger that stress response. Protecting erections is not just about what you avoid, but about creating a morning environment where the body feels safe, nourished, and balanced. When cortisol is kept in check early in the day, testosterone has room to do its job later, naturally and quietly, without force or medication. As men age, their bodies become increasingly sensitive to inflammation, even at levels that feel insignificant. Chronic, low-grade inflammation may not trigger pain or discomfort initially, but it slowly damages the cardiovascular system in ways that are critical for sexual health. One of the most vulnerable areas is the network of tiny arteries that supply blood to the penis. These arteries are smaller than those that feed the heart, so even minor inflammation can cause them to stiffen or narrow, leading to reduced blood flow and weaker erections. For men over 60, repeated exposure to high sugar or acidic fruits can unknowingly accelerate this process. Many fruits, particularly sweet or tropical varieties such as mangoes, pineapples, and grapes, contain high concentrations of natural sugars. While these sugars are not inherently bad, frequent consumption can trigger a subtle but continuous inflammatory response in the body. When blood sugar spikes repeatedly over time, the body produces more inflammatory molecules like cytokines and free radicals. This inflammation isn't something you feel immediately, but it slowly begins to affect blood vessels, damaging the delicate endothelial lining that controls how arteries expand and contract. Without a healthy endothelium, blood flow to all parts of the body, including the penis, becomes impaired. Acidic fruits like oranges, grapefruits, and pineapples can also contribute to inflammation when eaten in large amounts or on an empty stomach. The acid irritates sensitive digestive tissue, triggering the release of stress and inflammatory hormones into the bloodstream. Over months and years, this creates a low-level, persistent inflammatory state that stiffens arteries and reduces flexibility. Erectile arteries, being narrower than most others, are the first to suffer the consequences. This is why erectile dysfunction often appears as one of the earliest warning signs of vascular problems, sometimes years before heart disease becomes apparent. Inflammation also affects nitric oxide production. Nitric oxide is a chemical messenger that tells blood vessels to relax, allowing blood to flow freely. Chronic inflammation damages the cells responsible for producing nitric oxide, reducing their efficiency. With lower nitric oxide levels, arteries cannot dilate fully, restricting blood flow to the penis and making erections weaker, slower to achieve, or shorter in duration. Men often assume this decline is a natural part of aging, but in many cases, it is directly related to dietary habits and the inflammatory burden they create. The problem is compounded by repeated exposure. Eating a high-sugar fruit every morning, especially alone on an empty stomach, creates a daily cycle of inflammation that goes largely unnoticed. Over time, this cumulative effect becomes significant. What might seem like a minor dietary choice ends up gradually reshaping the health of tiny arteries critical for sexual function. The damage is insidious. It begins silently, long before pain or other symptoms appear, and once it progresses to a certain point, reversing it becomes increasingly difficult without medical intervention or major lifestyle changes. The emotional impact of this process is also significant. Men may notice their erections are less firm or reliable and often attribute the change to aging, stress, or fatigue. This misunderstanding can lead to frustration, anxiety, or avoidance of intimacy, further compounding the problem. Recognizing the dietary link to inflammation is empowering because it offers a clear, actionable step. By adjusting fruit intake and balancing it with protein, healthy fats, and lower sugar options, men can reduce inflammation, improve vascular health, and often restore erectile function over time. A practical example illustrates this clearly. Consider 66-year-old Tariq, who had been eating a large bowl of grapes and a banana every morning for years. Initially, he felt energized, and the habit seemed harmless. Over time, he began to notice that his erections were weaker and shorter lasting. He dismissed it as just age, until a routine checkup revealed early signs of arterial stiffness. After consulting a nutritionist, Tariq changed his breakfast routine. He paired smaller portions of low-sugar fruit with eggs and avocado, spreading fruit consumption throughout the day rather than concentrating it in the morning. Within a few months, he noticed improvements in both his energy levels and sexual performance. The difference was not immediate, but the steady reduction in inflammatory stress allowed his erectile arteries to regain flexibility, showing how powerful simple dietary adjustments can be. The key lesson is that chronic inflammation is a silent enemy for men over 60, particularly when it targets small, delicate arteries. Sweet and acidic fruits, while healthy in moderation, can contribute to this inflammation if consumed excessively or at the wrong time of day. By understanding how these foods interact with the body and making thoughtful adjustments, men can protect erectile function, improve blood flow, and even reduce their long-term risk for cardiovascular problems. The connection between diet, inflammation, and sexual health is not speculative. It is a tangible, actionable pathway that can have immediate and long-lasting benefits. Every meal, especially breakfast, becomes an opportunity to either support vascular health or inadvertently undermine it. In the case of erectile arteries, repeated inflammatory stress from certain fruits is a subtle but powerful factor that can no longer be ignored. After the age of 60, the body's metabolism, hormone balance, and circulation all operate differently than they did in earlier decades. One of the most critical factors affecting sexual health at this stage is not just what you eat, but when, how much, and in what combination you eat it. Fruits themselves are not inherently harmful. They are packed with vitamins, antioxidants, and fiber. But the timing, portion size, and food combinations can turn a healthy fruit into a silent saboteur of erections. Many men over 60 unknowingly create metabolic stress every morning by eating large amounts of sweet fruit on an empty stomach, believing they are doing something healthy. The truth is that this practice can disrupt blood sugar, stress hormone levels, and circulation, all of which are essential for strong erectile function. Timing is the first critical piece of the puzzle. The body's cortisol levels are naturally high in the early morning as part of the circadian rhythm, helping wake us up and mobilize energy. Eating large portions of sugar-rich fruits at this time, especially without other nutrients to slow digestion, produces a rapid spike in blood sugar. The pancreas responds with a surge of insulin, a hormone that helps move glucose from the bloodstream into cells. After 60, insulin sensitivity is reduced, which means blood sugar does not normalize as efficiently. The result is a sharp rise and subsequent drop in blood sugar, which triggers additional stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline to stabilize energy. These hormonal fluctuations create a cascade that can interfere with testosterone signaling, reduce nitric oxide production, and impair blood vessel relaxation, all essential elements of a healthy erection. Essentially, the timing of when you eat sugar determines how intensely your body reacts. Early morning fruit alone often coincides with the body's most vulnerable metabolic state, producing an outsized effect compared to eating the same fruit later in the day. Portion size amplifies the problem. A small apple or a few slices of melon may be harmless, but many men eat large bowls of grapes, bananas, mangoes, or pineapple for breakfast. These portions contain a surprisingly high amount of sugar, sometimes equivalent to a dessert. The larger the portion, the higher the sugar spike, the more insulin released, and the greater the stress on arteries and hormone systems. After 60, the cardiovascular system is less resilient, and the delicate arteries supplying the penis are especially vulnerable. Even temporary reductions in arterial flexibility caused by repeated sugar surges can reduce blood flow and weaken erections. Over time, these repeated metabolic spikes can contribute to arterial stiffening, low-grade inflammation, and hormonal imbalances that silently erode sexual performance. Combination, or rather the lack of it, is the third critical factor. Fruits are rich in carbohydrates but low in protein and healthy fats. Protein slows digestion, stabilizes blood sugar, and supports testosterone production, while fats provide satiety and help modulate hormone balance. Eating fruit alone is like sending a race car down the highway without brakes. The sugar enters the bloodstream unchecked, causing abrupt hormonal responses. Men over 60 who consume fruit alone often experience energy crashes, mood swings, and subtle declines in sexual responsiveness. Pairing fruit with protein and healthy fats changes the metabolic picture entirely. Blood sugar rises more slowly, insulin release is moderated, cortisol remains more stable, and testosterone has the opportunity to function properly. This small adjustment in combination can make the difference between morning habits that harm erections and habits that protect them. An example brings this concept to life. Consider 68-year-old Javed, who had long believed he was making a smart choice by eating fruit every morning. His breakfast usually consisted of a large banana, a handful of grapes, and a small orange. For years, he felt fatigued by mid-morning and noticed that his erections were weaker and less reliable in the evenings. He assumed it was simply age catching up with him. After consulting a nutritionist, he learned about the importance of timing, portion, and combination. He adjusted his breakfast to include 2 eggs, a small portion of avocado, and half a banana. He moved the remainder of the fruit to mid-morning as a snack. Within weeks, Javed's energy levels stabilized, and over a couple of months, his erections became noticeably firmer. Nothing about the fruit changed, only how, when, and with what it was eaten. The takeaway is that the real danger of fruit after 60 is rarely the fruit itself, but the way it interacts with the body's changing metabolism. Large portions of sweet fruit eaten first thing in the morning, without protein or fats, create insulin chaos, hormonal fluctuations, and reduce blood flow. Over time, these factors converge to weaken erections and reduce sexual vitality. By paying attention to timing, moderating portion sizes, and pairing fruit with supportive nutrients, older men can continue to enjoy the benefits of fruit while protecting erectile health. The solution is not elimination, but thoughtful combination, a small change with profound effects on both energy and sexual function. In essence, what many men over 60 need to understand is that every meal is a metabolic message. When fruit is consumed in the right timing, quantity, and combination, the message is one of nourishment and stability. When fruit is eaten alone, in large amounts, and at the body's most vulnerable time, the message is one of stress and disruption. The impact may be subtle at first, but over weeks and months, it can quietly erode blood flow, hormone balance, and sexual confidence. Making small, intentional adjustments to breakfast